picture a prison where the punishment is arithmetic. No treadmill, no irons, no gallows in the yard. Just a sum of money written against your name, and a wall between you and every possible way of earning it. Now fill that prison with families. Add children playing ball against a wall topped with iron spikes, a taproom that sells beer to prisoners at 5p a pot, a rent book, a begging grate, and a turnkey who knows every inmate's debt to the shilling. Add the smell of boiled bones and coal smoke and 300 people living in a space smaller than a coaching inn's yard. That's the Marshalsea. A debtor's prison in Southwark, on the wrong side of the river, in the shadow of a church. A place where a man could be locked up for owing less than the cost of the key that locked him. A place where you could be dying of shame in the morning and singing in a prison club by evening, because human beings can get used to almost anything, and the Marshalsea was where London sent people to prove it. Here is the joke at the heart of the place, and once you hear it, you will never stop hearing it. The only way out of the Marshalsea was to pay your debt, and the one thing the Marshalsea made absolutely impossible was earning money. A tailor locked away from his shop, a waterman locked away from his boat, a clerk locked away from his desk. The law took away a man's livelihood as punishment for not having money, and then waited, with a straight face, for the money to appear. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists reading the plaque on the one wall of it that still stands. We're living it. One family, 1 year. Everything they would have seen, smelled, heard, owed, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to work out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who find it soothing to hear about a man paying rent for the room he's imprisoned in. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. It starts with iron. Somewhere below you, before any light, before any bell, there is the sound of a ring of keys. Not jingling. Keys this heavy don't jingle. They knock against each other, dull and slow, like knuckles on a door as a man carries them across a paved yard. Then the sound you have learned in your sleep, the sound your whole body now keeps time by. The long grind of the lodge gate's lock turning over, tumblers falling one after another, and the shudder of oak and iron swinging back on its hinges to open the day. For half a second you don't know where you are. Your body knows before you do. Your body's already listening for the second sound, the one that follows the gate every morning of the world. The pump, the clank of the pump handle in the yard, and the first gush of water into somebody's bucket, and a man coughing his chest clear in the cold. Then the smell arrives, and you remember everything. It comes in layers. Damp plaster first, because the walls of this room haven't been dry since the place was built. Then last night's tallow candle, a greasy, muttony smell that clings to the ceiling. Then the chamber pot behind the screen of sacking in the corner, which is your job to carry down. And underneath it all, the smell of 4 people sleeping in a room 10.5 feet long by 8 feet wide, their breath and their bodies and their unwashed clothes, including yours, especially yours. From beyond the wall, high and clear, the bell of St. George the Martyr strikes 6. The church stands so close to the prison that the bell doesn't sound like it's ringing over you. It sounds like it's ringing about you. Welcome to the Marshalsea, Southwark, London, the 15th of March, 1824. You're lying on a straw mattress on the floor, rolled out at night between the table and the door, in a room on the 3rd floor of a barrack of 8 houses joined into one long block. Below you is your parents' bed, a hired bedstead with a flock mattress, and in it your mother and your little sister Lucy are two shapes under one blanket still asleep. Your father is not asleep. Your father is lying on his back with his eyes open, the way he does every morning between the gate and the bell, in the few minutes when he thinks nobody can see his face. Your name is Joseph Pike. You are 15 years old, and you have lived inside a prison for 9 weeks, though you yourself have never been arrested, never owed a farthing, never broken any law of England. You are here because your father is here, and your father is here because of £26, 14 shillings. And when I say you live inside a prison, I need you to understand what that means in 1824, because it is not what you're imagining. This is not a cell. There are no bars on this window. Nobody locked your door last night. The door doesn't even lock properly. It swells in wet weather, and your father has to lift it on its hinges to shut it. The Marshalsea is not a dungeon, is worse than a dungeon in a way that takes longer to explain. It's a small, walled, broken down boarding house that you're not allowed to leave. Or rather, that your father is not allowed to leave. You can leave, your mother can leave, Lucy can leave. Any debtor's family can walk out through the lodge in the morning and back in at night, past the turnkeys free as sparrows. The wall with its crown of iron spikes is for one person in this room only. The law has nothing against you. The law simply doesn't care where a debtor's children sleep, and so you sleep here, because a family that cannot pay one man's debt certainly cannot pay for 2 lodgings. 9 weeks ago you had never seen the inside of any prison. 9 weeks ago you were the son of Matthew Pike, stationer and print seller, of a narrow shop off Clerkenwell Green with a bow window. Your father washed himself every Saturday. Paper, quills, ink, sealing wax, song sheets, and prints of famous racehorses and shipwrecks hung on strings across the glass. You'd stood behind that counter since you were 11. You could cut a quill in 8 strokes and wrap a quire of foolscap so the corners came sharp as a folded letter. Then, on the 8th of January, in the grey middle of the morning, 2 men came into the shop. One stayed by the door. The other put his hand on your father's shoulder, gently, almost kindly, and said words you didn't understand then and can recite in your sleep now. At the suit of Mr. Voss, for a debt of £26, 14 shillings, a sheriff's officer's touch on the shoulder. That's all an arrest for debt is. No shouting, no irons. A touch, like a customer wanting attention. Your father said absurdly, of course, will you take a seat?" As if they'd come about a wallpaper order. His hands went on wrapping the parcel he was wrapping. You remember watching those hands finish the knot perfectly, while the whole world came down. They took him first to a sponging house, and there's a name you learn fast. A sponging house is the officer's own house, where an arrested debtor is kept a few days before prison, in case his friends will settle. It's called that because it squeezes you like a sponge. 1/2 crown for the bed, 2 shillings for a dinner of cold beef you could buy in the street for 5pence, a shilling for the fire, 6pence for the privilege of a candle. 3 days of that ate £1, 4 shillings of money your family no longer had, which is how you learned the first law of debt in England, the law nobody writes down. Being poor is expensive. The less money you have, the more everything costs. On the 12th of January, with snow coming down into the mud of Borough High Street, your father was moved to the Marshalsea, and you and your mother walked behind the hackney coach because riding in it would have cost 18p more. You'd expected something out of a print, a fortress, a portcullis. What you found was a plain brick front between a grocer's and the churchyard, and a doorway not much grander than a warehouse entrance, and inside it the lodge, a small dark room where turnkeys sit and everything in your life is decided. The turnkey on duty that first day was a heavy old man with white stubble and a leather waistcoat shiny with age, who looked at your father's committal paper, then at your father's good coat, then at your mother, then at you with pale eyes that had done this arithmetic 10,000 times. Master's side, he said. Not a question. He could price a coat through the door. That was your first sight of Mr. Gryce, senior turnkey of the Marshalsea, and the first lesson of the place came from his mouth before you'd been inside it 5 minutes. Rules is simple, he said, running the fee book down with a thick finger. Gates open sunrise to 10, strangers out when the bell rings at night. Debtor stays. Family does as it likes. Nobody goes over the wall on account of the spikes, and nobody needs to on account of there's no point. Running don't cancel a debt, young un. This lasts to you, because you must have been staring at the spikes through the inner gate. The debt stays here waiting for you. This is the only prison in England where the punishment can outlive the prisoner. Then he held out his hand, and your father put money into it, and you watched, not understanding. Nobody had sentenced your father to pay the turnkey. This was garnish, the entrance fee every prison in England collected by ancient custom, and behind it came all the others, fees breeding like mice. A fee to the clerk for entering the commitment, a shilling to the chamberlain, an inmate whose office it was to find newcomers a room. The Marshalsea ran on a system called Chummage. 56 rooms and often twice that many prisoners, so every man was assigned a roommate, a chum unless he paid. Your father was chummed on a horse dealer from Rochester, and paid him £0.50 a week to sleep elsewhere so that a wife and 2 children could live in a room the size of a carpet. £0.50 a week for emptiness. In the Marshalsea, even the absence of a stranger is rented. By the end of that first day, your father had paid out nearly 9 shillings and owed his creditor exactly what he'd owed at dawn. That evening he did 2 things you were not supposed to see. First, he took out his silver watch, the watch his own father had carried, wound it, listened to it, and put it away again with a face like a man closing a coffin. 2 days later, the watch went across the counter of a pawnbroker on Blackman Street, and 15 shillings came back in its place, and a pasteboard duplicate, the pawn ticket, went into your mother's needlebook, folded in with her needles and her grandmother's silver thimble, where it has lived ever since. She sews with that needle book on her knee every day of her life. Your father's time folded up among the pins. Second, late. When he thought you were asleep, he took a stub of chalk from his waistcoat pocket, and on the inside of the room's door, low down where a coat hanging on the nail would cover it, he wrote small and neat, £26, 14 shillings and 0 pence. You watched through your eyelashes and said nothing. You've said nothing for 9 weeks, but you look at that door every morning and your father looks at it and neither of you has ever mentioned it once, and that number has already changed twice. Because here is the second law of debt, the one that hangs over every room in this building like the smell of the tallow. The debt does not sleep. Court costs are added to it. The creditor's charges are added to it. It grows in the dark, quietly, the way ivy grows, while the man who owes it stands still inside a wall. Your father came in owing £26.14. The chalk this morning says £27.19. He has not spent a farthing of it. It simply grew. Your mother stirs and the day begins the way it always begins, with everyone pretending not to have been awake for the last quarter hour. This is a courtesy the whole prison observes. In a building where every family lives in one room, sleep is the only privacy there is, so people are generous about pretending. Your mother sits up, pins her hair by feel. No looking glass. The looking glass was sold in January and says what she says every single morning, in the voice she used to use in a house with a staircase and a parlour. Well, up then. The day won't wait. The day won't wait. As if the day were a coach. As if any of you were going anywhere. You roll your mattress and stand it against the wall, because with it down there is no floor to stand on. You fold the blanket in the same 3 folds. Lucy wakes the way 7-year-olds wake, all at once, talking before her eyes are open, this morning about whether the sparrow will come back to the window ledge. There is a sparrow she is taming with crumbs she can't spare. You take the pot down 3 flights of stairs that sag toward the middle like old mattresses, out into the yard, the corner by the wall where such things are emptied, and you do it fast before the yard fills, because there are girls your age in this prison, and a boy carrying a chamber pot wants no audience. The morning air stands in the yard like water in a tank. Coal smoke from 300,000 London chimneys settles into this narrow oblong and stays. The yard is the whole world of the Marshalsea, a paved strip, call it 50 yards by 12, between the barrack block and the wall. You can walk it end to end in 60 paces. Your father walked it 41 times yesterday. You counted, because he counts, and somebody ought to keep an eye on the man doing the counting. At the pump you wait behind 2 men in shirt sleeves and take your turn, sluicing your face and neck with water that comes up tasting of iron and last century. The cold of it snaps you properly awake. Above you the sky is a lid of pewter cloud crossed by the spikes on the wall, that endless iron comb, and beyond the wall, close enough to hit with a thrown apple, the tower of St. George the Martyr goes up into the smoke with its gilded clock face catching what light there is. The clock says 6:15. The spikes say what they always say. You dry your face on your sleeve and go back up to breakfast, past doors already open on other people's lives. A man shaving by touch at a triangle of broken mirror. A woman scolding in a low, fierce voice about a shilling. Somebody's baby crying. A smell of herrings from the 2nd floor where somebody is rich enough this week for herrings. Breakfast is bread, and tea brewed from leaves on their 3rd voyage, and for Lucy a smear of dripping on the bread because she is the youngest, and the war over whether she gets it ended weeks ago in her favour. Your father eats standing at the window, looking down into the yard, dressed as carefully as if the shop were still his. Coat brushed, neckcloth tied, chin scraped smooth. It takes him 20 minutes to dress, and it is not vanity. It is the last wall of a fortress. In here, a man who stops shaving has begun a fall that everyone recognises and nobody discusses. Appearances matter in the Marshalsea. They matter more, not less, than outside. Outside, a coat is a coat. In here, a brushed coat is a man saying, "This is a mistake, a temporary embarrassment. I am not of this place. You will learn before this year is out exactly how long a man can hold that line and what it looks like when it breaks." "Joseph," your father says without turning from the window, "Captain Harding wants you at 8, and your mother has the shirts for Aldgate when they're done. Mind your back before the bell." Mind your back before the bell. He says it every time you go out, and there is not one reason in law why you must be back before the bell. You could sleep in Hyde Park if you chose. The bell binds him, not you. You say it anyway. Before the bell. Yes, father. Because you have understood something in 9 weeks that you could not have put into words on the 8th of January. The wall is for him, but a family is a single animal. If one limb of it is caught, the whole creature stays by the trap. Your mother could lodge outside for less than the Chummage costs. You've heard her do the sums in a whisper, and she will not, and you know why, and it has nothing to do with money. The trap is baited with love. That's how it holds families for years. That's how it will try to hold yours. Before 8, you do the rounds, because you have become in 9 weeks a thing the Marshalsea always needs and always uses up. A day boy, a pair of free legs. The prison is full of men who cannot pass the lodge and full of errands that must pass it. And between those two facts, a boy with clean boots and a quick way of speaking can earn actual money. A penny to carry a letter to an attorney's clerk in Cheapside. 2pence to fetch tobacco, because the tobacco sold inside is dearer and drier. A penny to stand in line at the post office. 3pence once. To carry a canary in a cage across London Bridge to a married daughter in Fenchurch Street, with a message the man made you repeat until you had it perfect. Tell her the bird sings better than her father does, and eats less. You have regulars, you have rates, you keep the sums in your head the way your father taught you to keep them behind the counter, and every farthing goes home to your mother, and this is not virtue. It is the plain arithmetic of the animal in the trap. Your mother's needle and your legs are the family's whole income now. The shop is gone. Voss had execution against the stock, and strangers bought your father's paper and prints at auction in February, the racehorses and the shipwrecks, the good Dutch quills, the bow window's stock sold out of it in lots while the window watched. Your first call this morning, as every morning, is the snuggery to leave word you're going out. The snuggery is the prison taproom. Sit with that moment, because it tells you more about the Marshalsea than any law book. This prison contains a public house. Beer is sold by licence inside the wall, the profits farmed, and the room above the tap is the meeting place of the club the prisoners run themselves, with a chairman and rules and fines for bad language minuted in a book as solemn as any guild. Englishmen locked up do not form mobs, they form committees, and it is in the doorway of the snuggery that Captain Harding is waiting for you, as arranged with a coat over his arm. Captain Harding is the oldest inhabitant of the Marshalsea, and understand the word, not oldest in years, though he must be past 60, but oldest in residence. 19 years. He came in the year Trafalgar was fought, a half-pay officer ruined, they say, by a friend's forged bill, and the courts, and the wars, and the world moved on, and somehow never moved him anywhere. He has outlasted 4 deputy marshals and every turnkey but Grice. He is the king of the racket ground, the referee of every dispute, the man new prisoners are brought to as to a mayor. He walks the yard with his hands behind his back like an admiral walking a quarter-deck, and if the quarter-deck is 50 yards of cracked flagstones with washing strung across it, his walk declines to notice. Pike the younger, he says. Punctual? That's the shop in you. Never lose it. He hands you the coat, folded lining out, the way a coat is folded when it's going where this one is going. Blackman Street. The 3 Balls. Speak to old Solomon himself, not the son. The son thinks every coat in Southwark has the moth. It had 18 shillings of him last winter, and it shall not take a penny less than 15 now. Spring or no spring. You know the tune. You know the tune. This is the other half of what a day boy is for. Half the master's side lives by the pawnbroker in a slow tide. Coats over the counter in spring when the cold breaks, out again in autumn if the family can manage it. Watches, flutes, wedding rings, dress swords, a sextant once. The captain's coat has crossed Blackman Street so many times it could walk there itself. And a boy carries it better than a wife, because a wife at the pawn counter is a family's ruin published, but a boy might be anyone's. And pike, the captain says as you turn. This afternoon the racket ground 4 o'clock. Bring nothing but your hands. A boy who lives in this college shall at least learn its one science. The college. That's what the old inhabitants call the Marshalsea, and its people the collegians with a straight face, and you have stopped being able to tell how much of the joke is bitter and how much is real. Perhaps a college is precisely a place men enter poor and leave owing money. Nobody laughs when the word is used. That's the thing about the Marshalsea you cannot explain to anyone outside. It is all of it deadly serious and all of it a joke, both at once, always. Under the arch by the lodge, a knot of prisoners is gathered at the notice board where the court lists are pinned, and you weave past them, and past the grated window in the wall of the lodge passage. You do not look at the grate. You have taught yourself not to. Behind it is the begging box of the common side, and a voice, there is always a voice, is saying to the street beyond, level and worn as a step, "Pray, remember the poor debtors. Pray, remember the poor debtors." And when I say the common side, I need you to understand what that means, because everything I have described so far, the rented room, the herrings, the beer, the club with its minute book, all of that is the master's side, the quality end of the wreck, for families who can still find a few shillings a week. The Marshalsea has another end. Men with nothing, no shillings, no working wife, no boy with legs, are lodged in the common side wards, sleeping close as fingers, living on the county allowance of bread, on charity money from the box, on the leavings of the market. Fever visits that end of the building the way rain visits a bad roof. Last month a man died there whose whole debt, you heard Grice say, was £9, and it had taken 4 years of his life before it stopped taking. £9. Your father's chalk grew more than that in 9 weeks standing still. Here is the machinery, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. This is a prison where poverty is the crime and money is the sentence, and yet inside the wall, money goes on deciding everything, the same as outside, only smaller and harder. Sixpence divides a bed from a board. A shilling divides dinner from bread. 2 floors and 1 staircase divide the club singing from the fever ward. The Marshalsea is not a gentle place, but it is an exact one. It weighs every family on the same scale every week, and it never once looks away. The lodge, when you reach it, smells of grice, leather, pipe smoke, and the vinegar he rubs into his knee for the rheumatism. He is at his high desk, entering yesterday's committals in a hand like copper plate gone to seed. Above his head hang the keys on their numbered board, and a printed table of fees, framed as if framing a thing made it honest. Coat for Solomon's, you say, and after, mother's shirts to Aldgate. He doesn't look up. The captain's grey, pen still moving. 15 shillings and not a penny less, spring or no spring. The whole prison knows everything. It's the size of the place. A secret here has nowhere to stand. He blots the line, and his pale eyes come up over his spectacles and take you in. Boots to cap, the daily inspection. What he is checking you for, you've never been sure. Signs of the place getting into you, perhaps. He has watched prisons seep into children before, the way damp climbs a wall. 9 weeks, he says. Your father old his committal day, right? Some of 'em start miscounting about now, on purpose, like. He doesn't miscount anything, you say, and something in your voice makes the old man grunt, almost approval. No, he wouldn't. He reaches under the desk, and there is the sound that runs this whole world. the dull knock of the great keys. The wicket in the gate swings. Beyond it, Borough High Street, carts, voices, morning England. Back before the bell, young 'un. The bell's not for me. So they all say, says Grice, the first year, and the wicket shuts behind you with a sound like a full stop. You stand a second in the street as you always do. One breath. The air outside the wall is the same air, the same smoke, the same Southwark reek of hops and horse dung and the tanneries away south. It tastes different anyway. You've never worked out whether that's the air or you. One more thing before you go up the street, because it happened last night and it's riding with you this morning like a stone in your boot. Late, past 10, past the bell, you woke on your mattress to candlelight and saw your father at the table, writing. Not accounts. A letter. You watched him work at it the way he used to work at a difficult customer's bill, drafts, crossings out the good quill. And you saw him finish it and read it over and fold it and direct it, and then you saw him not send it. He put it inside his writing desk, the little portable desk with the brass hinges that survived the auction, because the law leaves a man the tools of his trade, and he turned the key on it, and sat with his hands flat on the lid in the candlelight like a man holding a box shut on a live thing. You know who it's to. There is only one person in the world your father has anything to say to. That costs that much candle. You have not seen the letter. You will. Everything in that desk, everything under that chalk, everything folded into your mother's needlebook, all of it is coming out into the light before this story is done. Because a prison this small keeps nothing hidden forever. It only keeps it waiting. But that is for later. This morning you have a coat over your arm that is not yours. 15 shillings to win from a man who has heard every sad story in Southwark twice, and a city on the other side of a bridge that doesn't know your name. Borough High Street takes you the way it takes everyone, by the ears first. And when I say a street, I need you to understand what this street is, because there is nothing left like it now. Borough High Street in 1824 is the throat of England. Every coach, wagon, drove and foot traveller from Kent, Surrey and Sussex, from the Channel ports, from Dover itself, funnels up this one road to reach London Bridge. And there is only the one bridge hereabouts, and so there is only the one street, and all of it happens at once. Stagecoaches swinging out of the great galleried inn yards with the guard's horn going, the George, the White Hart, the Tabard that they call the Talbot now. Inns 400 years old, Chaucer's pilgrims drank at this end of the street, and the hop wagons from Kent piled higher than a house, and drovers bringing sheep to the bridge in a grey woolly flood that stops everything, and everyone shouting, not from anger, from arithmetic. The ones who shout are heard, the ones who are heard are paid. Watercress, fine fresh watercress. Milk below, maids, chairs to mend. Dust ho, dust ho. 100 yards of it, 1,000 voices deep, and running under all of it like a ground bass the sound of iron tyres on granite sets, which is a sound you will carry out of this century in your bones, a low continuous thunder, the sound of London being fed. You go down the east side, fast, the coat held high out of the crowd's grease, past the gates of the King's Bench, the rich man's debtor's prison, where they say a lord's son plays fives all morning and dines on turbot, past the shuttered fronts of the old mint rookery, where even constables go in pairs, past the fruit stalls where oranges have arrived from Portugal, past a placard man carrying an advertisement for Warren's Blacking 30 Strand, and you think, as you always think at that placard, of the boy from the staircase next to yours, but him I'll give you presently. past all of it, to Blackman Street and the Three Brass Balls, where Solomon the Elder waits behind his counter in his skull cap with his glasses pushed up on his forehead, in a shop that smells of camphor and other people's Sundays. The negotiation takes 11 minutes, and it goes like a fencing match between two people who have fenced before. He offers 12. You don't answer 12. You unfold the coat and lay the lining open to the light, because the lining is silk twist and both of you know it, and you say what the captain taught you to say, that this coat has been in and out of this shop since before the son was in the business, that it has never once come in damp, never once come in with the buttons shaved, that its owner has never been so much as a day behind on the interest, and that custom like that in the borough is worth 18 shillings of anybody's money. But the captain, being fair, expects only what it had last winter. Last winter it was cold, says Solomon. Last winter it was 18, you say. Coal's got cheap this year. Wool hasn't. The glasses come down off his forehead. He goes over the coat the way a surgeon goes over a man. Cuffs, collar, seat, seams, and finds what you knew he'd find, which is nothing, because the captain keeps that coat like a ship's brass. 14, he says. 15, you say, and stop talking. Your father taught you that behind the counter in Clerkenwell when you were 12. Name the true price once, then let the silence work. Silence costs nothing, and the other man always pays to end it. Solomon looks at you a long moment, something dry and old and almost warm moving at the back of his eyes. The captain teaches you a trade, he says, counting out 15 shillings and writing the duplicate. And the trade he teaches you is squeezing me. On the way back up the high street, you carry the money the way Grice taught you in your second week, and this is a London lesson worth having. Split, never together. 5 shillings in the boot, 5 in the waistband, 5 loose in the pocket for the world to find if the world turns you over. The crowd at the church corner is thick as porridge, and a man with a tray of penny buns lets you smell them all the way past. Warm currants and scorched sugar, and you are 15 years old with 15 shillings on you, and you do not buy a bun. Every farthing goes home. The bun goes into the long ledger of things wanted and not had, which is a ledger every child of the Marshalsea keeps, and which some of them, you have begun to notice, go on keeping all their lives, even after the wall lets them go. Back through the wicket before 9. The captain takes his 15 shillings and has the grace not to count it in front of you, which in this place is close to a knighthood, and at 4 o'clock, as ordered, you present yourself at the racket ground with nothing but your hands. The racket ground is the bald end of the yard where the wall stands highest, and the game the collegians play against that wall is rackets, a fast-slamming, shirt-sleeved game, the one flower that grows in this paving. The Marshalsea is mad for it. Matches are made, sides are wagered in pots of beer, and the wall that keeps every man here spends its afternoons returning their serves with perfect indifference. The captain, past 60, plays like weather, unhurried and everywhere at once. It's while you're chasing his dropped shots that you find it, wedged in the crack where the paving meets the wall. A racket ball, dead of old age, its stitched seam burst, grey as a mouse, worn smooth as a chestnut by years of hands. You go to toss it to the captain and he waves it off. Keep that, he says, not even breathing hard. First thing the Marshalsea ever gave you for nothing. There won't be a second. You put it in your coat pocket, the left one, and there it stays. Through everything that is coming, the summer and the funeral and the winter and the worst night and the last morning, that small grey weight rides in your left pocket, and your thumb finds its burst seam the way a tongue finds a broken tooth, and it becomes, without your ever deciding it, the thing your hand does instead of being afraid. You don't know that yet. This afternoon it's just a dead ball. But you keep it. The shirts go to Aldgate 2 days later, and the shirts are a story in themselves. So take them with you, and I'll tell it on the way. Your mother sews shirts. Not the shirt she used to sew. Fine work for her own family with feather-stitched hems. Slop work. That's the word, and the word is exact. Cheap ready-made shirts for warehouses that clothe sailors and emigrants and anybody who buys his linen by the armful. A warehouse off Aldgate gives out cut pieces on a Friday. Collars, cuffs, bodies, sleeves, and takes back finished shirts, and pays 6pence a shirt. And a shirt done properly, seamed, gusseted, buttonholed, wristbanded, is a long day's sewing. 6pence for a day of a woman's eyes. She does 9, sometimes 10 shirts a week, working by the window until the light dies, and then by a candle she grudges, and it is the steadiest money your family has, and it is never, ever enough. And every Friday she unpicks her own exhaustion and folds it flat and starts again. She was a tradesman's daughter. She had a girl who came in twice a week to scrub. You have never once heard her say a word about the difference, and the not saying is its own sound in your room, like a note held so long you forget it's ringing until it stops. So on Friday morning you take the bundle, 10 shirts wrapped in a square of oilcloth, tied with the particular knot she ties, and you carry your mother's week through the wicket, down the high street, into the raw, toward the bridge. And this time, go slow at the bridge foot, because I want you to see what you're crossing. London Bridge, the old one, the only dry crossing this side of Blackfriars, and it has been standing in the river, in one patched shape or another, for 600 years. 19 arches once, fewer now, widened and mended, the houses that used to crowd along it torn down before your grandfather's time. So what's left is a broad stone road on ancient legs, and the legs are the thing. Each pier stands on a starling, a boat-shaped island of rammed piles and rubble, and the starlings are so fat with 6 centuries of repairs that they choke the river. The tide, forcing through those narrow openings, drops like a weir, 4 foot, 5 foot of fall at the half-tide, a stare of brown water roaring between the piers. Watermen call it shooting the bridge, taking a boat through at speed, and watermen have died at it for 600 years, and the proverb your father quoted the first time you crossed together goes, "The bridge was made for wise men to go over, and fools to go under." Halfway across, if you look down river between the granite parapets, you can see the pool of London, and there is no preparing anyone for the pool. Masts. A forest of them, thick as a pine hillside, ships moored 3 and 4 deep along both banks for a mile. Colliers from Newcastle, West India men with their yards crossed. Baltic timber ships, and between them the whole water alive with wherries and barges and skiffs like beetles on a pond. They say more tonnage moves through this river than through any other water on earth, and standing here with your mother's shirts on your shoulder, you believe it, and you understand in your skin what the warehouses and the sugar and the smell of tar are telling you. This is the richest square mile in the world, and your father is in prison a 15-minute walk from here for £26, 14 shillings. Now look up river, west side, because something is happening there in 1824 that Londoners will talk about for a generation. Staging, piles, cofferdams going down into the riverbed, cranes and barges of granite from Scotland. They are building a new London Bridge, 100 feet upstream of the old one, 5 clean elliptical arches to the old bridge's crowd of legs, engineered by the Rennies, the sons finishing what the great John Rennie designed before he died. Work began this very year. For the next 7 years the two bridges will stand side by side, the new one rising while the old one goes on carrying its 1,000 carts a day, the future and the past in the same water, close enough to throw a biscuit from one to the other. You will cross the old bridge 100 more times before this story ends, and every single time the new one will be a little taller, and you will find you are keeping its progress the way other boys keep the cricket, because it is the one thing in your whole visible world that is plainly, measurably going somewhere. Over the bridge, and the city takes you. Fish Street Hill with the monument standing over it. 202 feet of Portland stone with its golden urn of flames, built to remember the Great Fire. And your father told you once, in the shop days, that if you laid the monument down flat it would reach exactly to the baker's oven in Pudding Lane where the fire began. That's why it's the height it is, and you have never been able to pass it since without laying it down in your mind. Then up into the streets where the money lives, Gracechurch Street, Lombard Street, past doorways with brass plates instead of shop windows, banking houses, discount houses, insurance offices, buildings that don't sell anything you can hold, quiet as churches inside, and richer than kings. And in Bishopsgate, where you turn east, you pass it. You don't mean to. The route just goes that way, and your feet found it the first week and have never unfound it. Voss and Son, wholesale stationers, a tall drab warehouse with a crane jutting from the third-floor gable, and reams going up in the sling, and through the ground-floor door sometimes, a stooped grey view of the counting-house within. Mr. Voss, the name chalked in effect on the inside of your family's door. Your father dealt with the house of Voss for 11 years, bought his paper there, took his credit there, shook hands there at Christmas. You have seen the man himself exactly once since January, through this doorway, at this angle, a neat, narrow-backed old man at a high desk, adding figures under a green shade, and what shook you was how ordinary he was. Not an ogre, not a spider, a tired old tradesman in an ink-stained cuff protector, who is owed money and means to have it, and whose own paper mills you've heard your father say to the captain are pressing him. Voss is squeezed, so Voss squeezes. Somewhere above Voss, someone is squeezing too. The whole city is a single hand closing, and at the very bottom of the grip, in the last knuckle of it, is a room 10 feet by 8 with your mother's needle going in the window light. You stop 11 seconds at that doorway. You allow yourself 11 seconds, and your thumb finds the seam of the ball in your pocket, and then you walk on, because hating a man does no sums, and the shirts are due by noon. The warehouse off Aldgate smells of new cloth and gaslight, shelf on shelf of dead men's shirts waiting for bodies, and a foreman with a wooden rule goes over your mother's work seam by seam looking for a reason to dock her. This is the ritual. He finds nothing. He never finds anything. Her stitching could shame a sailmaker, and he pays out 5 shillings for the week's 10 shirts minus the 6pence he docks anyway. For a mark on a collar you cannot see even when he points to it. You are 15 and he is 40, and there are men waiting behind you, and you take the 5 shillings, and this is the taste of it, this exact moment. This is what the year teaches over and over. The powerlessness is the point. He docks her because he can, because the docking reminds everyone which side of the rule the power stands on. Tell her 6pence finer next week, he says, already looking past you. You tell your mother nothing of the sort. You tell her the foreman said her seams could shame a sailmaker. the 4 and sixpence you hand over whole, and if you walk the 4 miles home instead of taking a penny boat to save the penny, that's your affair and the river's. But you did take the boat once, in April, and I'll give you that afternoon, because it's the afternoon the city showed you its whole hand. A sculler from the tower stairs, 1 penny, an old waterman with forearms like mooring rope, who looked at you sideways and said, "Bridge or round?" and grinned when you said round, because only strangers and suicides say through when the tide's making. He took you up the middle of the pool at oar pace, through the smell of tar and bilge and wet hemp, under the counters of moored India men with their gilded stern galleries hanging over you like cliff houses, and he talked the whole way, watermen always talk, about how the steamboats are ruining the trade. There are steam packets on the river now, paddle boats churning down to Margate every summer morning, and every one of them carries 80 fares that used to go by oar. "My father rowed 40 year," he said, spitting neatly to leeward, "and the river fed him. It'll feed me thinner. The boy after me it won't feed at all." He said it without heat, the way men state the tide tables. Then he put you off at London Bridge stairs and charged you the penny and called you captain. You have thought about him more than you expected to. Everyone in this year of your life you're beginning to notice is being squeezed by something too big to see. The waterman by steam, Voss by his mills, your father by Voss, the foreman probably by somebody above the foreman. The whole world is a debtor's prison, walls inside walls, and the Marshalsea is only the place where they finally write the number on the door. Evenings, the prison turns almost kind. That's the thing nobody outside will believe, and you have stopped trying to tell them. At dusk the yard fills. The day boys and the working wives come home through the wicket. The cook fires send up their smells, fried fish somebody's daughter carried in from the high street, onions, tobacco, and the collegians walk the pavement in 2s and 3s, coats off, the day's shame set down for an hour the way a porter sets down his load. From the open windows of the snuggery club room comes the noise of the Marshalsea's parliament, the scrape of benches, the chairman's little hammer, and singing. There is singing most nights. Sea-songs, catches, sentimental ballads that would embarrass a printed page, sung in parts by ruined men with their eyes shut, and it floats up over the spikes and out into Southwark, and people passing in the street outside stop and listen and cannot tell, no one could tell, that the sound is coming from inside a prison. Your family's neighbours on the next staircase are part of that sound, and I want you to look at them for a moment, because in 100 years pilgrims will come to look for the very bricks that held them, though nobody in this yard could possibly guess it. They came in on the 20th of February 5 weeks after you. A Navy Pay Office clerk, a round, brisk, talkative gentleman going grand and threadbare at the same time, committed for £40 and 10 shillings owed to a baker. He took a room 2 doors along, and inside a fortnight, being that sort of man, he was chairing the committee that manages the club, proposing healths, drafting, it is said, a petition to the king himself for the prisoner's bounty on the royal birthday, in language, the captain says dryly, considerably finer than the occasion. His wife and the small children live inside with him, same as you. But it's the eldest boy you notice, 12 years old, small, quick-eyed. He doesn't live inside. He lodges alone somewhere over the water and works, they say, 10 hours a day in a blacking warehouse by the river, pasting labels on pots at 6 shillings a week, and he crosses London on foot every Sunday and sits with his family in the prison until the bell, and then goes out through the wicket alone into the dark. You have passed him on the stairs. You have nodded to him, one working son to another, and once, on a Sunday evening in the yard, you stood near him while his father held forth to a circle of collegians, and you saw the boy watching everything, the grate, the spikes, the singers, his own father, with a stillness that wasn't a child's stillness at all. It was the stillness of someone taking an inventory, filing it, all of it, where it could never be taken from him and sold. You will think of that boy again. Not soon, but you will. At 10, the bell. It hangs by the lodge, and a turnkey rings it, and its message is the oldest in the place. Strangers, out. All visitors, all outside friends, everyone whose name is not in the books, must be beyond the gate before the last stroke, and the collegians walk their guests down to the lodge the way hosts see guests to a carriage, and there are handshakes at the wicket, and jokes, always jokes at the wicket, and then the gate is shut and chained, and the Marshalsea is only itself again, 300 souls and their arithmetic, locked in with the night. You are in your room by then, always, not because the bell commands you, because of the hour that follows it, which has become, of all the hours you will carry out of this place, the one you'll carry longest, and you cannot let your father spend it looking at an empty mattress where his son should be. The candle is dipped, not moulded, a farthing cheaper, and it weeps grease, and by its light the family does its quiet things. Your mother sews the eternal shirts. Lucy is asleep behind the sacking screen, her breathing small and even, the sparrow's crumbs already set on the sill for morning. Your father reads yesterday's newspaper, borrowed from the club, every column of it, advertisements included, with the deliberate thoroughness of a man rationing his own mind. And sometimes he reads out a line about the money markets. The funds are lively. There is a mania this year for South American shares, silver mines in countries 3 months' sail away. Fortunes bought on paper in Change Alley by men who could not find Peru on a globe, and he reads it in a voice you can't quite name. Amusement over something older and sorer. A shopkeeper listening to God's gamble. And at some point the candle gutters, and he looks at the flame, measuring wick against darkness, the nightly ration, and says, as he says every night, "Well, that'll do for today," and pinches it out with wetted fingers. "That'll do for today. Never a word about tomorrow. Tomorrow is the chalk's business. You lie in the dark on your mattress between the table and the door and listen to the prison settle, and this is the sound that will visit you at odd moments for the rest of your life. 300 people going quiet in one building, coughing in layers, near and far, a voice through 2 walls rising once and giving up, the watchman in the street beyond the wall crying 10:30 and a fine night for free men, the last pot noise from the snuggery, rain when it rains, on one roof and differently on the paving, and under all of it the thing you cannot actually hear but would swear to on any Bible, the debt growing, farthing by farthing in ledgers all over London in the dark, the numbers turning like slow wheels, while every debtor in England sleeps. The debt does not sleep, but you do. You're 15, and you walked 11 miles today, and the night before the world changes sounds exactly like every other night. It always does. The world changes on a Tuesday in April, and it starts, like most ruin, with politeness. But first you need Dick, because Dick is beside you when it happens, and Dick has been beside you by then for the best part of a month. Dick Sowerby, 16, is the son of a hop factor from Maidstone gone down in last autumn's market, and he is the only other person in the Marshalsea who is exactly what you are. A son, not a debtor, free-legged, in prison anyway. You met the way boys meet. Over the racket ball he plays a slashing, dishonest, cheerful game, and you fell in together the way boys fall in, completely and without a word about it. And now the two of you run half the prison's errands as a firm, split the pennies, and hold, in the crack between the 7th and 8th barrack where the chimney breast makes an alcove, what Dick calls board meetings, which are the two of you sitting on a coping stone sharing whatever there is to share. Dick's rule, delivered the first week with the hop factor's son's authority. Never let 'em see you counting. Rich boys count in public. We count in the dark, like owls. His father is a wide, sighing, gentle man who plays cribbage all day for pennies and is liked by everyone and can no more mend his affairs than mend the weather. His mother died before the fall, so Dick has adopted your mother sideways, the way stray things adopt, and your mother, who has one son, feeds him a crust with a straight face and calls him Master Sowerby, and Dick calls her ma'am and goes red every time at being called anything at all. Now, the Tuesday. Word comes in the morning, through Grice, in the official way. Mr. Voss's attorney will attend at the prison at noon, the creditor being minded to discuss terms. Terms. The word goes through your family's room like sunrise. Terms means an offer. Terms means a door drawn on the wall in chalk where no door is. Your father shaves twice. Your mother brushes his coat and then brushes it again. And nobody says the thing that is filling the whole room, which is perhaps. They meet in the lodger's side room, the one with the table, and you're not present. No one but the parties is present, but the Marshalsea is 56 rooms round 1 yard, and by 2 o'clock you know everything. Everyone knows everything, and here is what happened. The attorney, a young man doing a duty plainly relished as little as a wet walk, laid it out. Mr. Voss would discharge the debt and costs on payment of £15 ready money, the balance forgiven. £15 for a debt now grown past 28. A merciful offer, as such offers go. Your father, who does not have £15, who does not have 5, asks for time, composition by instalments, 10 shillings a month, secured on his future trade, for he will trade again. And the attorney looked at the table and delivered his principal's answer, which your father repeated that evening to the captain in the yard, flat, like a man reading another man's handwriting, and which you, standing in the shadow of the staircase door, heard and have never managed to unhear. Mr. Voss says, a man's future trade is smoke, the stock is sold, the £15 or nothing. He says he is sorry for it. He says, tell Pike I am not a hard man, but I have been patient 2 years, and patience is capital, and mine is spent. Patience is capital, a stationer's phrase. Your father used to say it himself, in the shop mildly, about slow-paying customers, and hearing his own proverb come back through the wall at him with its teeth filed sharp did something to him that the arrest itself never did. That evening he doesn't read the newspaper. He sits at the table with the brass-hinged desk in front of him, unopened, his hands flat on the lid, and he looks at the chalk on the door, £28, 3 shillings and something, and he says to the room, to nobody, in a voice with all the polish gone off it, I could be free for £15. It might as well be 15,000. And that is the night he finally tells you, both of you, Lucy asleep, how it happened. You have never asked. 9 weeks, 10, 12. And you have never once asked, because sons don't. But tonight he needs to say it more than you need to be spared it. And it comes out of him quietly, all in order, a tradesman's account of his own shipwreck. It was a bill, not even his own debt at bottom. 2 years ago, an old friend, a map seller of Holborn, a man he'd known 30 years, stood in sudden need and asked him to put his name to a bill for £40, an accommodation bill, backing another man's promise, the way tradesmen do for each other, the way his own father had done and been done for in his turn. You know what that means in 1824, and if you don't, learn it now and be spared much. To sign the back of another man's bill is to say, if he does not pay, I will. It is friendship written in the one language the law enforces. The map seller shook his hand and wept a little, being that kind of man, and 11 months later the map seller was dead of a bad chest, insolvent, and the bill came round, endorsed on through hands neither of them ever knew, and settled at last in the hands of Voss and Son, who had discounted it in the way of business, and who turned to the one solvent name on the paper. Your father paid what he could and bled the shop white doing it. The remainder, with charges, was £26 14 shillings on the 8th of January. You know the rest. You live in the rest. I signed in his shop, your father says. On the counter by the globes, he held the wax for me. He turns his hands over and looks at them. Your grandfather told me, never write your name on the back of another man's promise. I knew it like I know the catechism, and I should do it again tomorrow, God help me, because he was my friend, and that is what the word is for. He looks up at you then, and this is the moment of all this year when your father becomes a fixed star in your sky, because his eyes are perfectly steady, and what he says is, understand me, Joseph. I am not in prison because I did wrong. I am in prison because I did right imprudently. The law cannot tell those apart, so a man must keep his own books on the matter. A tap, 2 fingers, over his waistcoat pocket where other men keep watches, and he keeps nothing now, in here, where the bailiffs can't distrain them. Then he lights nothing, wastes nothing, banks the little fire and says, well, that'll do for today. The letter in the desk stays in the desk, but now you know what it must say, or try to say, and why it was written at midnight, and why it has not been sent. What can a man write to the holder of his ruin? I am not what your ledger says I am. Every debtor in this building is composing that letter, in ink or in his head, every night of his term. Almost none of them are ever sent. The chalk answers them all. Spring widens over Southwark. Even here, even in the yard, the light gets taller day by day, climbing the spiked wall a course of bricks at a time until, by mid-May, for about 40 minutes in the afternoon, actual sunshine lies flat and golden on the racket ground paving, and the collegians drift to stand in it, casually as if by chance, the way cats are casual, 20 ruined men warming in a stripe of sun 40 feet long. And on the 28th of May, the Marshalsea does the thing it does best and most rarely. It lets somebody go. The pay office clerk, your talkative neighbour, the chairman of the club. It comes out, all in a rush of a morning, that his mother has died and left him a legacy, and his affairs are taken in hand, and the machinery turns, and suddenly, after 3 months and a week, it is over, and the family 2 doors down is packing. You watch the wife on the stairs with her boxes dazed, half her things already sold and the other half not worth carrying, and the little ones excited the way children are at any upheaval, and the clerk himself shaking hands all round the yard twice round, promising correspondence, promising assistance, promising his interest with men of influence, glowing, sincere, already halfway back into the world of appearances, and the collegians take it well. They always take a release well. It is the point of honour of the place. A man's freedom is cheered at the wicket by everyone his freedom leaves behind. You happen to be near the lodge when they actually go. The quick-eyed boy is there, come from the blacking warehouse. It's a working day, but he is there, and he walks out through the wicket last of all of them, behind his mother, and at the threshold, 1 foot in Southwark, he stops, half a second, and looks back. Not at any person, at the place, at the arch of the lodge and the yard beyond it and the spikes with the light on them, takes it, the whole of it, one last time, into whatever ledger he keeps behind those eyes. Then he's gone into the crowd of the High Street, 12 years old, and you never see him again. Grice watches the wicket shut and squares the books on his desk and says, to the lodge in general, in the voice of 40 years, and in a month he'll cross the road not to see this gate, and in a year he'll tell his friends he was never here. That's the release, young 'un. The wall lets go of the man. Whether the man lets go of the wall, that's his own business, and mostly they don't. Then he enters the discharge in a hand like copper plate, gone to seed, and rules the line under the family, and the room 2 doors down stands empty for exactly 1 day before a corn chandler from Bermondsey is chummed into it, owing £51, with a wife and a dog the rules forbid and everyone pretends not to see. That evening your father is quiet in the new way, not the old way. The release has gone through the master's side like weather, brightening some men, darkening others, and your father sits at the window doing what you know now to call his sums, and finally says to your mother over the shirts, a legacy, his mother's death bought his freedom. The candle spits. We are reduced to arithmetic where a man cannot tell his good news from his bad. And your mother, needle-going, not looking up, says, the thing that you will remember when the cleverest sayings of cleverer people have all worn away. Then we'll keep our own arithmetic, Matthew. We are 4 and we are together, and this week's shirts are 9 and there'll be 10 next week. Count that. I do. We are 4 and we are together. She says it the way other people say, Amen. You are 15, and it will be years before you understand that she was not comforting him. She was correcting him. Of the 2 ledgers kept in that little room, hers was the accurate one. June comes in hot. The yard bakes, the pump runs warm by afternoon. The smell of the place thickens until you wear it like a second shirt. And on the common side, 2 men go down with fever in a week, and the begging voice at the grate gets a new note in it, and everyone on the master's side gives what they can spare, which is little, and gives it quickly, the way people pay to keep a story from ending where they can see the ending. And out in the world, though you don't know to watch for it, a coffin is coming home by sea from Greece. A lord is dead at Missolonghi, the most famous man in Europe, dead of fever in a swamp at 36 with the whole world's eyes on him, and the ship carrying him is beating up the channel toward the Thames, and in 3 weeks' time her cargo is going to pass within a mile of your wall and pull half of London into the streets, and you with it. You do not know his poetry. You know his name. Everyone alive knows his name. You're about to learn what London does when a name that size goes by. The name is Byron. Through the last week of June, the newspapers your father borrows are full of nothing else. The body has come up the Thames in the brig Florida and lies in state in a house in Great George Street, Westminster, and the crowds outside it are so thick that tickets are issued, and the abbeys and cathedrals have refused him. The deans closing their doors on the most famous Englishman since Nelson because of the life he lived and the verses he wrote. So he is to be carried home to Nottinghamshire instead, to a village church, and the procession will leave Westminster on the morning of Monday the 12th of July and go north through the whole body of London. In the Snuggery Club room they talk of it for a week. Half the collegians can quote him, which surprises you until you think about it. Sad, grand, ruined, glamorous, and in debt his whole life, his lordship was the very patron saint of half this yard. The captain, who was at sea when the name first rose, says only, he kept his debts like a gentleman, which is to say enormous and unpaid, and nobody ever put him in here. There's your rank, Pike. The wall itself is means tested. And your father, folding the newspaper along its creases, says a stranger thing. In the shop, he says, in the good years, he sold the cantos as fast as the coach brought them, at half a crown when working men earned 20 shillings a week. He sold Byron to apprentices who missed dinners to buy him. I have had that man's face on my counter in Mezzotint, Joseph, 20 impressions at a time. He paid my rent for a season, and never knew I lived. And now he goes by, and I shall not see it. He says it without self-pity, which is why it lands the way it lands. So on the morning of Monday the 12th of July, 1824, you and Dick go for the family. Not idly. The firm never travels idly. Dick has heard, through the ostler's grapevine of the borough inns, that along the line of the procession a boy who can hold horses will be wanted because gentlefolk will ride to see it, and must dismount to stand, and horses and crowds and minute bells make ill company. You take the day's chance the way you take every chance, as work first, wonder after. You cross London Bridge at 7 with the sun already hard, work up through the city as it empties, everything flowing one way, west and north, and by 9 you are on Oxford Street. And Oxford Street is not a street any more, it is a standing sea. And when I say a crowd, I need you to understand what London can do when it truly turns out, because you thought you had seen crowds on Borough High Street. The pavements are packed 10 deep from the shop fronts to the curb. Every window of every upper floor has heads in it. Every balcony sags. Boys your age stand on ledges and cling to lamp irons. Men have climbed onto the roofs of hackney coaches, onto porticos, into the young trees. Shops are shut along the whole line as if for Sunday. And the sound of it is the thing you will try and fail to describe to Lucy tonight. Not a roar, the opposite of a roar. 100,000 people producing together a sound like held breath, a vast rustling murmur, pierced every half-minute from somewhere ahead, by the minute bells of parish churches tolling one stroke at a time, passing the coffin from parish to parish along the line the way watchmen pass the hour. Your employment finds you almost at once, as employment finds boys who look for it. A stout gentleman up from Richmond on a nervous bay mare, who must see the procession and cannot hold the mare in this press, and who looks at you and Dick with exactly one question in his face, and Dick answers it before he can ask. 2pence the hour, sir, and shall stand like the monument. And so you spend the great public event of your century in a side lane off Oxford Street, with your shoulder against the warm neck of a Richmond mare, smelling horse and crowd dust, and the strange funeral smell of a hot city gone quiet, seeing, between hats and shoulders, in slices, everything. The procession comes a little before 11. First you feel it, a pressure moving along the crowd the way wind moves along a wheat field, heads turning in a slow wave. Then the mutes on horseback, black from hat to hoof, with their staves. Then the plumes, nodding trays of black ostrich feathers. And then the hearse itself, huge, black, glassed, 6 black horses with velvets to their heels, moving at a walk so slow it seems the street itself is sliding backward past it. and on the coffin, on the pall, a coronet on a cushion, and you are close enough, in one slice between two shoulders, to see the sun flash once on the gilt of it. A lord under velvet, and the abbey doors shut against him. Even at the top of the world, it seems, there are rooms a man is not let into. You think of the master's side and the common side, and you are 15, and you stand in a lane holding a stranger's horse and understand England. And behind the hearse comes the thing you will tell for the rest of your life, the thing the whole crowd is murmuring at, the detail that has already gone down the street faster than the procession itself. The carriages, between 40 and 50 of them, a train of them, town coaches with crests on the doors, the equipages of the first families of the kingdom, dukes' liveries, earls' hammercloths, rolling slow and gleaming in the line of mourning, and they are empty, every one. The great families would not come themselves, would not sit their persons behind that scandalous coffin, but could not quite dare to be absent from the register either, so they sent the boxes and kept the men. Carriage after carriage after carriage of upholstered nothing, blinds drawn, going at a walking pace through 100,000 living people who came on their own feet. Beside you, a man in a printer's apron watches the crests go by and says to nobody, in a voice like a nail going in, "The shells came, the oysters stopped home." And a woman near him is crying without any noise at all, an ordinary woman with a market basket, tears sliding down a face that isn't moving, and when her neighbour touches her arm she says, "I never knew him, don't mind me, I don't know what it is." And that, you will think later, was the truest thing said in London that day. 100,000 people in the streets, and hardly one could have told you precisely what they were mourning. Something enormous had been alive and was not, and they came to stand in its wake and feel the size of it go past. It takes the better part of 2 hours to pass, moving at that dead walk, north toward Tottenham Court Road and the long road to Nottinghamshire. The bells hand it on, parish to parish, one stroke at a time, until the strokes are too far to hear. The crowd unclots slowly, talking quietly, oddly gentle with itself, strangers stepping back to let strangers pass. The Richmond gentleman reclaims his mare 3 hours gone, and is generous the way men are generous on strange days. A full shilling instead of sixpence, pressed into your hand without counting. And Dick, who vanished twice into the crowd on affairs of his own, reappears with 4pence earned holding a second horse and a mysterious further 6pence. He declines to explain beyond commerce, Pike. Commerce! And the firm walks home the whole way, down through the emptied city, over the bridge, into the borough, richer by 1 shilling and 10pence and carrying something else, heavier, that neither of you has words for and neither of you mentions, which is how boys carry such things. The wicket, the lodge. Grice on his stool in the cool of it, who has heard already, of course, the whole of it. The crowds, the empty carriages, everything. The wall is no Walter News. He looks the two of you over, dusty, sunburnt, solvent, silent, and reads the whole day off you like a committal paper. Seen the world bury a lord, have you? He hooks his thumb toward the yard, where the evening walkers are making their circuits inside the spikes, round and round, the map sellers and hop factors and pay clerks of the world, the men whose names fit no newspapers. Mind you remember what you seen. All them grand coaches and nobody in 'em. This place is the other way about, look. No coaches at all, and everybody in. He says it and turns back to his book, an old man pleased with his own hard sentence. And you go in through the arch, and that night in the room you give the shilling and the 10pence to your mother, and you tell it all to Lucy. The plumes and the 6 horses and the mare called. You have decided, Duchess. and Lucy asks the question children ask, which is why was he in a box if he was a lord, and nobody laughs, and your father at the window watching the last light stand on the wall spikes, says quietly, mostly to the glass. They shut the abbey against him and sent their empty coaches after. Remember it, Joseph. Next time this place makes you ashamed. Respectability is a coach with the blinds drawn. There may be nobody inside at all. Then the bell and the strangers out and the chain on the gate and the candle and the sums and, well, that'll do for today. But it doesn't do, quite, not that night. That night, for the first time since January, you can't sleep. You lie on your mattress with the burst-seamed ball in your fist and the day going round in you, the held-breath murmur, the one flash of guilt. The woman crying at she didn't know what, and somewhere in the small hours you understand what has changed, and it is not the world, it is the size of the rooms in you where the world is kept. Grief, you have learned today, can be enormous and vague and still real, and its opposite too, which means the thing pressing on your family, the chalk number, the wall, the whole exact machinery of shillings, is not the whole of what is real. It is only the part with sharp edges. There is another ledger, your mother's kind. We are four and we are together, and 100,000 strangers stood in the sun today to make an entry in it for a man they never met. You are too young to say any of that. You're exactly old enough to feel it. You fall asleep with a ball in your hand, and the summer turns, and the year begins its long walk down toward winter. And now I can tell you the rest more quickly, the way the year itself went. Not day by day any more, but season by season, the way time actually passes for people who are waiting. August gives you the tower. It comes about through the sparrow. Of all the small hinges a year can turn on, Lucy's sparrow, tamed by months of crumbs, is by high summer so shameless that it comes through the open window and takes bread from the sill inside, and Lucy has told the story of it to everyone in the yard, and the story travels, the wall being no wall to stories, as far as the old sexton of St. George the Martyr next door, who keeps the church and digs its graves and winds its clock, and who says to your mother after service one Sunday that being a church-going family is the one respectability the Marshalsea cannot dock, that a girl who can tame a sparrow ought to see where the bells live. And so, on a white-skied Tuesday evening, you and Lucy present yourselves at the vestry door, and the sexton, a dry-bowed man named nowhere in this story, because you never learned his name and were too shy to ask, takes a lantern and a key the length of your forearm and leads you up. The tower of St. George the Martyr has stood not 90 years. The church rebuilt in the 1730s, brick below and Portland stone above, and its steeple goes up in stages like a spyglass pulled out, and you climb it from the inside, a turning stair, then ladders, past the silent works of the clock, a cage of brass and iron ticking like a slow heart, must and pigeon dust and oil, past the bells themselves hanging dead still, great dark garden bells of metal. You have heard every hour of every day for 7 months, and now stand close enough to touch, and Lucy will not touch, and then a low door, and out, onto the leads, into the wind, and there it is, London. You've lived at the bottom of it for half a year, in its narrowest place, and here is the whole of it at once, and no one has ever prepared you. No print in your father's window ever prepared you. The evening sun is behind the smoke, so the city lies in a bronze haze, roof after roof after roof, a sea of tile and slate running north to the hills of Hampstead and Highgate, lying blue at the world's edge. The river bends through the middle of it like poured metal crowded with sails, and the bridges stride over it, and upstream of the old bridge you can see, tiny and clear, the staging of the new one. The cranes stopped for the evening, the future standing quietly in the water. St. Paul's rides over everything on the far bank, its dome floating on the haze the way a mountain floats above valley mist, so big it does not seem built, and around it 40, 50, 60 steeples, white and grey needles, every parish in the square mile pointing at heaven, and beyond them the masts in the pool like a stubble field, and the sounds coming up to you thinned by height into one soft continuous breath, cartwheel and church bell and street cree and hammer, the whole roaring world reduced to the sound a shell makes at your ear. There's your city, the sexton says, hands folded on the parapet like a man at his own altar rail. 500,000 souls or thereabouts this side and that, and more coming in off every road every day of the year. Look your fill, boy. Folk pay a shilling to stand on the monument for less view than this. And then Lucy, who has been silent the whole climb, tugs your sleeve and points, not out, but down, directly below, foreshortened, framed in its wall the way a picture is framed, the Marshalsea, the whole of it, the barrack roofs in their line, the yard, that 50 yards of world you have walked 10,000 times, a strip of grey no bigger from up here than a hearthrug, the racket ground, the pump, the spikes on the wall, which from this height you cannot see at all. The wall is just a wall, low and ordinary among 100 other walls, and the evening walkers going round inside it are small dark figures round and round, and one of them, by the set of his shoulders and the count of his turning, one of them is your father. The whole prison, every debt in it, every chalked door and needle book and letter locked in a desk. All of it together is one small quiet rectangle in an ocean of roofs, and the city does not know it is there. That is what the height teaches, and it teaches it in about 4 seconds, and you will never fully come down from it. Every trouble you will ever have after this evening, some part of you will see from the tower leads, small and walled and surrounded by an enormous shining indifferent world, and the world's indifference, which frightened you when you first passed the wicket in January, will look strangely like mercy from up here. The city is not against your family. The city is not even watching. The city is a weather, and weather changes. The sexton follows your eyes down and reads the two of you, the way old men who dig graves read faces, and what he says to the roofs mildly, in the tone of a man quoting his own long arithmetic. I've dug in this yard 40 year, and I'll tell you what I know. From down there, that wall's the end of the world. From up here you can't hardly find it. Nothing that has an inside and an outside is the whole world, boy. Remember where you stood tonight. A pause, the dry ghost of a smile. And when it's heavy on you, look up. The bird your sister feeds crosses that wall 20 times a day and has never once noticed it's there. You come down the ladders in the last light, past the clock, which chooses that moment to gather itself with a whir like a great creature drawing breath and strike 8 directly over your heads. Lucy shrieking with laughter in the dark, the whole tower humming under your palms, and you carry the shaking of it out through the vestry door and in through the wicket. And Grice at the lodge says, "Bells, was it?" unsurprised as ever. And that night on your mattress you can still feel the hum in your hands, and above the coughing and the watchman and the settling dark you hold the picture, the grey hearthrug, the turning figure, the bird that has never noticed the wall. You will need that picture. Autumn is coming, and autumn is when the year starts taking things away. It takes Dick first. It happens the way everything official happens in the Marshalsea. Notice on the board by the lodge, whispers before noon, certainty by supper. Sowerby the hop factor's affairs have been compounded at last. His Maidstone creditors, tired of paying for nothing, have agreed to take 7 shillings in the pound and call the carcass picked, and there is an uncle in the hop trade at Southwark's edge who will take the father in as a warehouse clerk. And Dick is to be bound apprentice to a wharfinger at the bridge foot, indentures and all. A real place, a real trade, cargoes and ledgers, and the river he has talked about all year the way other boys talk about the sea. It is everything you could have wanted for him, and the week before he goes is one of the best weeks of the year, the firm winding up its affairs in style, 3 errands run for pure swagger, a farewell match on the racket ground where the captain plays the 2 of you at once and beats you at 67 and 5 and declares himself wheezing satisfied with the rising generation. And then it is the last morning, an October morning with the first real bite in it. Mist on the yard, the pump handle cold as a gun barrel, and the Sowerby's boxes at the lodge, and there is nothing left to do but the thing there are no words for. Dick puts out his hand like a man because he's trying to be one, and says, "Well, Pike, keep the trade going, don't let Solomon rob the captain." And you take your left hand out of your pocket, and in it is the ball, the dead grey ball with the burst seam, worn smooth by every hand this place ever swallowed. The first thing the Marshalsea ever gave you for nothing. You have carried it every day since April. You put it in his palm and close his fingers on it, and you hear your own voice come out steadier than it has any right to be. Boards dissolved. Take the assets. Dick looks at the ball, and being Dick, he laughs, and being 16, he has to work at his face for a second while he does it. "The Marshalsea's own," he says. "I'll keep it on the wharf. Anything comes at me looking like trouble, I'll show it where I was educated." And he pockets it left. The same pocket, and shoulders a box and goes through the wicket after his sighing gentle father, out into the mist and the morning traffic, and the gate shuts, and that is the last of the firm of Sowerby and Pike, errand runners of the borough, and you stand a moment in the lodge passage with your empty pocket, and Grice from his stool, without looking up from his book, says, "You'll see him. Bridgefoot's 10 minutes." And then, dipping his pen in exactly the same voice, "Won't be the same, mind, never is." Because Grice's mercy, you have learned by now, is that he never once lies to you, and it is a real mercy, and there are days it is very hard to like. He is right on both counts. You do see Dick some Sundays at the wharf gate, and it is good, and it is not the same. The wall is between you now, not because Dick forgets. Dick never forgets. But because his days fill up with tide tables and cargo and a foreman's temper and all the furniture of a life going forward, and your days are still the yard, the errands, the bell, the chalk. Freedom is not a place, you discover, watching him wave from among the barrels. It is a direction, and he is moving in it, and you're standing still, holding your family's place in the queue. The chalk, that same October, is rubbed out and rewritten for the 3rd time, and the new figure is £31 and 2 shillings. Court charges at the term, the attorney's letters, each one itemised against the debtor it threatens. Your father writes the number small and neat and hangs the coat back over it, and stands a moment with his hand flat on the door. And that is the week you first notice that the line his fortress has been holding all year is beginning, very quietly, to bend. Not the shaving, he shaves. Not the coat is brushed. It is smaller than that, the way real subsidence is always smaller than the crack in the plaster. He has stopped reading the money columns aloud. All those bright manias, the South American mines, the shares doubling in Change Alley, the paper fortunes, all year they had been his wry evening comedy, and some evening in October, without announcement, the comedy closes. He reads the paper still but silently, and folds it smaller than he used to, and you understand without being told that a man can bear the distance between his chalk and £15, but the distance between his chalk and a world where clerks grow rich by breakfast, that distance has begun to cost him more than the debt itself. The days shorten, the stripe of sun on the racket ground thins and tilts, and one afternoon in November fails to clear the wall at all, and does not come back. The collegians walk faster on their circuits now, hands in their sleeves, and the smell of the yard changes from dust and drains to smoke and wet stone, and the begging voice at the grate says its one sentence into fog. 4pence of every shilling you earn goes on coal now. You've become a judge of coal the way you were a judge of pennies, short weight, wet sacks, the chandler's thumb. Winter is coming to the Marshalsea, and winter in here is not a season. It is a creditor. It calls every day, and it will not compound, and the poorest pay it first and pay it worst. And winter is where the needle-book opens, and the thimble nearly goes, and your father's letter finally comes out of the desk. So bank your fire, and I'll tell it. The bad fortnight begins in the second week of December, and like all bad fortnights, it is not one blow but three, arriving politely, one behind the other, each holding the door for the next. First, the warehouse off Aldgate cuts the rate. 6pence a shirt becomes 5pence. Trade is slack, says the foreman. Take the pieces or leave them. There are women on the stairs behind you who'll bless me for them. He's not lying about the stairs. That is the horror of it. He's never lying about the stairs. Your mother takes the pieces. 10 shirts now earn 4 and 2pence where they earned 5 shillings, and the same eyes and the same candle do the earning. Second, the cold comes down like a lid. The famous cold of that December. The pump handle burns bare skin at dawn. The water stands in fringes of ice in the buckets, and on the common side, where men sleep 2 blankets to 3 bodies, the coughing changes key, and one grey morning a ward's window stands open to the yard and everyone walking below knows, without asking what that means, and the begging voice at the grate says its sentence faster. Pray remember the poor debtors. Pray remember the poor debtors, because in December the box is not rhetoric. The box is firewood and physic, and the difference between the sides of this prison, which all summer was beer and herrings, is now the difference the sexton measures. Lucy takes the cold onto her chest. Not badly, you will say it quickly because you spent that fortnight unable to say it at all. Not badly. A cough, and 2 feverish nights and chilblains that make her cry when her feet warm. A child's ordinary winter in an unwarmed room, and she is over the worst of it by St. Thomas's Day, demanding the sparrow be fed extra against the weather. But for 2 nights your mother does not so, because she is holding her, and for 2 nights your father stands at the black window with his hands behind his back, absolutely still, and you lie on your mattress doing the only sum that has ever frightened you. Coal is 1 and 10pence the hundredweight, and going up. Physic was 9pence. The rent and the chummage fall due together at the quarter. The shirts are down to 5pence, and third in the middle of it, the letter from Blackman Street. Civil, printed, terrible. The 12-month on the watch is nearly run. Renew the interest or the pledge is forfeit, And forfeit means the counter, the shelf, a stranger's Christmas, your grandfather's watch sold to any passing waistcoat with 18 shillings, and the pasteboard ticket in the needlebook worth exactly nothing. You are in the room, all four of you, the evening your mother does her accounts aloud, which she does once a quarter, flat and unhurried, a tradesman's daughter to the last. What is owed, what is coming, what is short. What is short, when she reaches the end of it, is about 7 shillings. 7 shillings between your family and choosing coal against watch, watch against boots. There's a silence with sewing in it, and then she opens the needlebook on her knee, unfolds the pawn ticket from among the needles, looks at it a long moment, and takes out the thing that lives beneath it, wrapped in a scrap of flannel smaller than a playing card. Her grandmother's thimble, silver, worn thin as paper at the crown, the engraved band rubbed to ghosts. You have known it your whole life the way you know her wedding ring. It came to her from the grandmother who taught her to sew, and the two of them, ring and thimble, are the whole of what she carried out of her girlhood, and she turns it in the candlelight with a face you have never seen on her, perfectly calm, pricing it, and she says, Solomon would give 5 shillings for the silver of it. It is only a thimble. I can sew with brass. And your father says from the window without turning, in a voice pressed entirely flat, No. Matthew. The watch may go, he says. The watch is mine to lose. That is not. There are things a family does not eat, Hannah. We're not at them yet. When we are, it will be my watch on the counter and my coat after it, and your thimble last of everything after my own boots. I have signed one thing away in my life that I ought to have kept. I will not warm my feet at another. It is the nearest thing to a raised voice that rumour's heard in 11 months, and it is not raised at her, and she knows it. And the thimble goes back into the flannel, and the flannel into the needlebook, and nothing more is said, because the sum is still short. The sum doesn't care about any of it. So you go to work on the sum, and here the year, which has taken and taken, briefly gives. It gives you Christmas traffic. The George, the great galleried inn 100 yards up the High Street, is in its madhouse fortnight. The Kent and Sussex coaches doubled with holiday mails, geese and hampers going up to London, parcels and passengers coming down, ostlers run off their legs from long before light, and the head ostler, who has watched you hold horses and run parcels for a year and knows exactly what you are, takes you on for the rush at a shilling a night, evenings till the last up coach, lanterns and buckles and trunks and steaming teams in the freezing yard, work that leaves your hands cracked and your shoulders sung through with ache. Real work. Work. You're glad of the way only the frightened are glad of work. 6 nights, 6 shillings, and on the 7th evening, when the last mail has swung out of the yard with its horn going and its lamps swimming off into the fog toward the bridge, the ostler pays you and adds 6pence over for the goose ye ain't time to win, and you walk back down the High Street with the money split 3 ways about you, boot, waistband, pocket, past the shut shops with their holly, and in through the wicket before the bell. The interest on the watch is paid the next morning, 2 shillings and a penny, the ticket renewed for another 12-month, the pasteboard going back into the needle-book among the needles, under the flannel, under the thimble, everything in its place, the family's small sacred things holding their line for 1 more year. And there is coal in the corner, a full sack of it, and the room that night is warm enough that Lucy's chilblains let her be, and your mother sews late, and your father reads out, for the first time since October, one small dry item from the newspaper, some alderman's turtle soup misadventure, choosing comedy again, deliberately, the way a man chooses to walk after an illness. 7 shillings. That whole crisis, start to finish. Remember the number. Whole families in this building, whole years of this city, turn on sums a lord would not stoop to pick out of the mud. Christmas in the Marshalsea. I will give you honestly, which is to say, it is one of the good days, and its goodness is the kind that stings. There is charity beef and beer got up by subscription. The master's side dining together in the club room, benches crammed. The chairman's hammer toasts the king. Absent friends, better times. Each toast plainer and quieter than the last. The captain carves at the head of the long table because seniority is seniority, and does it like an officer, and sees the common side's portion carried through the yard first, covered with 2 men to carry it decently. There is singing until the bell, and after the bell from your own staircase, you can hear it going on softly inside the wall, the old songs, and through the window across the black yard, other windows lit low and orange, each one a family doing its version of the same, pretending. And the pretending, you understand at last, is not weakness. It is the wall the poor build nightly against the other wall. It is the most serious work done in this place. Your family's Christmas is a goose pie your mother stood in line for at the bakehouse, and chestnuts, and Lucy's sparrow at the sill in the morning, bold as a churchwarden, and a parcel that came up 2 days before by the Rochester coach with no letter in it, only a twist of paper enclosing a shilling and 1 dead grey racket ball, and on the wrapping, in a fist like a capsizing barge, for the firm's junior partner, who is to keep the assets till called for. Merry Christmas, D. Sowerby. And the ball goes back into your left pocket, where it has always lived, and your thumb finds the burst seam, and you stand at the window a long time that evening, looking at nothing, being 16 years old in 11 weeks, learning that a thing can be entirely foolish and entirely holy at the same time, which is the last lesson the Marshalsea teaches, and the one it teaches best. And then it is the 8th of January 1825, 1 year to the day since a hand touched your father's shoulder in his own shop. Nobody says it aloud. Everybody in the room knows it. The chalk under the coat says £31 2 shillings. It said 26.14 when it started. A year of standing perfectly still, and the number eating all the while, and that evening your father sits down at the table, sets the brass-hinged desk in front of him, and unlocks it. He takes out the letter, the one from the first spring, the one written at midnight and never sent, folded and directed and waiting 13 months. You and your mother watch him, and neither of you moves, and he unfolds it and reads it through, once, slowly, his own voice of a year ago going up through his eyes in silence. Whatever it says, whatever he was that midnight, still trying to make Voss see, honour, friendship, the mapseller's grave, the whole plea of a man who believed his ruin was a misunderstanding, he reads every word of it. Then he folds it back along its creases and stands, and lays it on the fire. It catches at the corner, blue then yellow, and is ash in half a minute, and he watches every second of the burning, and what he says when he says anything, he says to the fire, quietly, in the voice of a man ruling a line under a column, "I have been writing to the wrong court." He turns and looks at your mother, and there is something in his face that has not been there all year, and it takes you a moment to recognize it, because it is so plain. Decision. I'll not outwait him, Hannah. He has the law of me, and the chalk only grows. Very well. There is one door out of this place that opens from the inside, and it is time. I shall take the act. The Act, the Insolvent Debtors Act. And now I must explain the strangest mercy in English law, the trapdoor at the bottom of the whole machine. A debtor who has lain in prison, who will swear to his whole estate down to the last fork, surrender everything, to be sold for his creditors, and satisfy the court that he has hidden nothing and dealt fraudulently with no one, such a man may petition the Insolvent Debtors' Court and be examined, and if he survives the examination, be discharged. Free, not forgiven. The balance of the debt hangs over any fortune he may afterward make, but his body, his person, his legs and hands and days are his own again. It sounds, when I say it like that, like the obvious door, and you will ask why every soul in the building has not long since gone through it, and the answer is the whole anatomy of this place. Some are waiting on money that is always nearly come. Some have creditors who will oppose, and opposition can sink a petition and worse. Some have kept back a trinket, a tool, a pound or two, and dare not swear the oath. And some, and your father was one of them for a year, and be slow to blame him, cannot do it because the schedule is a public stripping. Every debt, every mischance, every soft loan from a brother-in-law printed in the Gazette cried in court. A tradesman's whole private struggle turned out like pockets before strangers. The Act does not ask a man for his money. He has none. It asks him for his account of himself, whole, sworn and published. That is the price of the door. That is why the proud die inside sooner than pay it. You could only leave this place by paying, I told you at the start, and here at the bottom of the year you finally see the whole shape of the joke. Your father cannot pay in coin, so he will pay in the only currency left when coin is gone, everything he owns, and the full public truth of what became of him. The Marshalsea takes its exit fee in pounds if you have them, and in pride if you do not, and it is the second purse that empties slowest. The petition goes forward in February. There are forms, there are fees, there is a smudged, crowded morning at an attorney's chambers off Chancery Lane. The attorney, a shabby brisk man who does insolvents by the dozen, and is kind in the brutal way of the very busy. The schedule is drawn. The estate of Matthew Pike, stationer, late of Clerkenwell Green, now of the Marshalsea prison in the borough. It is 1 page, and it is short. Household goods, sold already, the January of the arrest. Stock in trade, sold under execution. 1 silver watch, in pawn, ticket produced. Wearing apparel of self and family. Tools of trade, videlis at 1 portable writing desk with brass hinges, contents pens, ink, sealing wax, claimed exempt as tools whereby he may earn his bread. The attorney reads that item, glances up, says, "Desk stays with you. The Act allows a man his tools, they'll not grudge you your pens," and goes on reading, and does not see. Because to him it is Tuesday, your father's hand open flat on the desk lid like a man whose 1 plank has been ruled, officially part of himself. Notice is served on the creditor, who has the right to come to court and oppose. And so the name of Voss enters your family's story for the last time, and the last act of the year begins, and it begins, like the first one, with everyone brushing their coats. The hearing is set for a morning at the end of March, 1825, at the Insolvent Debtors' Court in Portugal Street, hard by Lincoln's Inn Fields, and you go because your mother must stay with the room and someone of the family must see it, and you're 16 now. Your birthday came and went in the middle of the month with a bakehouse pudding and a new-bound blank ledger from your father, who gives account books the way other men give blessings, and it was, though neither of you said so, exactly that. Your father crosses London that morning in the keeping of an officer, for a debtor attends his own deliverance still a prisoner, and you walk from the borough over the bridge, and the new bridge alongside is taller again, the first arches springing now, stone curving out over the water towards stone, and you note it the way you have noted it all year, the one clock in your world that only goes forward. Portugal Street is not grand. That's what undoes you slightly after a year of imagining. A plain, crowded, whitewashed court, benches like a chapel, a smell of wet coats and floor oil and anxiety, commissioners up behind a long desk in gowns, clerks below shuffling schedules by the hundredweight, and around the walls, waiting their turn on the paper, the insolvents of London, each with his little cluster of family, each brushed to the last thread, tailors and victuallers and printers and a ruined riding master with his whip still under his arm because habit outlives everything. Case after case is called ahead of yours. 10 minutes here, 4 minutes there, whole shipwrecked laves passing through at the pace of a turnpike gate, opposed, unopposed, remanded, discharged, the hammer of the list falling all morning, and you understand, sitting there with your cap in your hands, that this room is the other end of the machine you have lived inside all year. The Marshalsea gathers them. Portugal Street, drop by drop, lets them out. The wall and the trap door, one system, breathing in and breathing out, and the chalk numbers of half of England passing through this one whitewashed room. In the matter of Matthew Pike, stationer, he stands where they put him and takes the oath and answers, and you discover that you are not afraid of the commissioners, nor of the schedule, nor even of the opposition that may rise behind you. You are afraid of his voice, that it might waver, after everything, at the naming of it all in public, the bill, the friend, the auction, the pawn ticket, item by item in the dead flat language of the court. It does not waver. He answers like a man reading his own ledger aloud, because that is what he is doing. He has been ruling these columns straight in the dark for 14 months, and it turns out that all that midnight bookkeeping, the chalk, the burned letter, the sums whispered over the candle, all of it was practice for this quarter of an hour. The proudest man you know empties his pockets before strangers without one tremor, and it is not humiliation after all. That is the thing nobody could have told you, and you could only stand there and see. Done this way, spine straight, nothing hidden, nothing begged. It is the opposite of humiliation. It is a man paying in full, in the only coin he has left, and it turns out that paying, even this way, even this, can be done with dignity, and the whole room feels it, the way a room feels weather change. The commissioner looks over his spectacles. Does any creditor oppose the discharge? And in the pause, you turn, because you cannot help it, and he is there. At the back, by the door, in a snuff-brown coat, narrow-backed, old, Mr. Voss, come in person, after all, across the whole of London. The pause stretches, the clerk repeats the question, and Mr. Voss looks at your father, one old tradesman at another across a whitewashed room, a look with 11 years of invoices in it and 2 years of lawyers, and then he shakes his head once and says, in a dry voice that carries exactly as far as it must, and no further, no opposition, the estate is honest. I have done with it. 4 words of it stay with you. The estate is honest. From that man in that room, it is not mercy. Mercy was never in his line, and your father would not have taken it. It is something narrower and in its way larger. It is a receipt. The ruin is countersigned, both parties. in full and final settlement. Mr. Voss puts on his hat and is gone before the order is even drawn back to Bishopsgate, to his own pressing mills and his own climbing chalk, a tired old man in a falling market, and you never see him again, and you spend years on and off trying to decide what you feel about him, and you end where your father ended, which is nowhere sharper than this. He was not a hard man. He was an exact one. The age was hard, and he was merely one of its numbers, as you were. Discharged. One word, a scratch of the pen, the hammer falls, next case called, in the matter of the machine breathes on. 14 months, and the ending takes 11 seconds and is nobody's drama but yours. You're outside in Portugal Street in the spring noise before it lands, and when it lands it is not where you expected. It is in your knees, of all places, and in a ringing lightness at the top of your head, and your father stands on the pavement of Lincoln's Inn Fields, a free man in the middle of London. And what he does first, before anything, is take off his hat and stand there bareheaded in the thin March sun for a moment, eyes shut, like a man stepping out of a church, or into one. There are formalities yet. There is always paper. Freedom itself is entered, ruled, and filed. It is 2 days more before all is perfected, and the Marshalsea's books can let him go. And I am glad of the delay, and so, oddly, will you be, all your life, because it gives the place time to do its last things properly, and the last things are these. The watch comes home first. You're sent to Blackman Street the final morning with a pasteboard ticket from the Needlebook, and 15 shillings, and 10pence counted to the farthing, redemption, and the last of the interest. Earned the final penny by needle and errand, and old Solomon brings the watch up out of his shelves in its 1.25 years of wrapping, and winds it a turn or two himself professionally, and lays it on the counter with the chain arranged, and says, "Tell your father, from me, that most of them never come back for the watch," and looks at you a moment over the spectacles and adds, "And the ticket always smells of the Needlebook, boy. Pins and flannel. I could have told a thimble from 100. It would never have got past my conscience to buy it." Which is the only sentimental thing Solomon says in this entire story, so keep it. Then the room. The bedstead goes back to the hire man. The mattress is rolled its last roll. The boxes stand corded by the door where 14 months ago they stood uncorded, and your mother sweeps a floor that belongs to nobody, and scrubs the shelf and leaves the room cleaner than any room in any prison has ever needed to be. Because that is who she is, and some work is done not for the next tenant but to the record of oneself. Lucy crumbs the window-sill one last royal feast for the sparrow, and cries, and will not say what for, and is not asked. And last, with the coat already over his arm, your father takes out his handkerchief, and rubs the inside of the door until the chalk is gone. £31, 2 shillings, and under it the ghosts of all the sums it used to be, back down through the year, 28, 27, 2614, all of it wiped to a grey smear and the smear wiped white, and he does it without ceremony and entirely with ceremony, the way he did everything, and then he sets his hat straight and picks up the brass-hinged desk, his tools, his own, and says, "Well," and for the last time in that room does not say the rest of it, because today is not a day that will do. Today is a day that will keep. At the lodge there are hands to shake the whole length of the passage, because the master's side turns out for a release. It is the point of honour of the place, and the captain is at the gate itself. Of course he is, dressed as for an inspection, and he shakes your father's hand and bows over your mother's and then takes your hand, yours, in both of his old racket hard ones. And this is the goodbye you've been dreading most, and he knows it, so he makes it easy, which was always his one luxury, making things easy for others in the place where nothing was. Bike the younger, when you are rich, and you will be, tradesmen's sons who count in the dark always are, you will hear men say of some poor devil, he ended in a debtor's prison, as if that were the end of the man. You will know better, you will know it is only an address. The pale old eyes go up the wall along the spikes, affectionately, terribly. Nobody leaves the Marshalsea, boy. Some of us merely stop sleeping here. I stopped leaving it a long time since, and your father never once arrived, and that, if you want it, is the whole secret of the place. The wall only ever holds what agrees to be held. Now be off. The gate is a draught, and I am an old man. And he turns back up the yard, hands behind his back, the king of 50 paces, and takes up his afternoon walk exactly where he left it. And that is how you will always see him when you shut your eyes, going away up the Marshalsea yard in the spring light, unhurried, at home, the one man the door was never going to open for, walking as if the pavement were the deck of something still at sea. Grice is on his stool. Before your father passes, the old turnkey stands, which you have never once seen him do for a discharge, and the two men look at each other, the debtor of 14 months and the turnkey of 40 years, and Grice says, "Mr. Pike," and your father says, "Mr. Grice," and that is every word of it. Two tradesmen of the same hard trade acknowledging the accounts closed, and then the keys knock, the dull iron knuckle sound that began this story, and the lock turns over, tumblers falling one after another, and the wicket swings, and your family walks through it, all four together into the noise of Borough High Street, and the gate of the Marshalsea shuts behind you for the last time, with the sound of a full stop, and you are outside, and it is over, and the High Street does not pause even slightly. The carts and the cries and the thunder of iron on granite rolling on exactly as they rolled the January you arrived. Because the city is a weather, and the weather has changed, and weather never once looks back. What comes after is small and honest and slow, which is to say, it is life. 2 rooms over a cheesemonger's in a street off the Clerkenwell Road, the old parish, the old bells, the desk on a plain table by the window, and your father, 60 days a debtor's walk from nothing, begins again at the only beginning there is, a law stationer's outwork first, engrossing and copying at so much the folio, the good quill going all day by the window light, and then a corner counter rented in another man's shop, and then, in time, but that is another year's story, a bow window of his own again, smaller than the first, washed on Saturdays, with prints of racehorses and shipwrecks hung on strings. The balance of the old debt hangs above him in law, as I told you it must. But Voss's house never once comes after it. The estate is honest, the receipt was signed, and the paper sleeps in a drawer in Bishopsgate the way spent storm sleep. Your mother sews for her own family again, feather-stitched hems, and mends the ledger of the household back to blue ink, and never, in all the years, in your hearing, says one word against the 14 months, and only once, when a neighbour speaks of debtors the way the comfortable speak of debtors, lays down her needle and says, in the flat, clear voice of the tradesman's daughter, "We lived among them a year. We met better courtesy there than I have met in some parlours," and takes up the needle, and that is the end of that neighbour's subject for ever. The thimble is on her finger to the end of her days, worn to a silver breath, and it goes to Lucy in time, in the needle-book, with everything folded into it that a needle-book can be made to hold, which you now know is a great deal. You apprenticed that same summer, at 16, to a wharfinger at the bridge foot, and if you want to know how that came about, ask the other half of the firm. Dick spoke for you to his master with the shameless persistence of a man selling hops, and so the two of you are together again after all. Tide tables and cargo books and the assets, the grey ball with the burst seam, sit on the sill of the counting-house between your two desks for years, the most valuable, worthless object on the legal keys. From the wharf steps all that first summer, you watch the new London Bridge grow, arch answering arch across the water, and in June comes the great day when the first foundation stone goes down with the Lord Mayor in his barge, and the guns firing, and the river dressed over all, and you stand on a bollard to sea, a working man among working men, cheering the future with your cap off, and only you, of everyone on that wharf, look downstream a moment, south and east, toward a church tower with a gilded clock and a low wall you cannot see from here and could not find from here, and know exactly to the yard where it stands. Because the captain was right, as he was right about everything except his own case. The wall lets go of the man. The rest is the man's own business. And some evenings, that first free summer, walking home over the old bridge with the day's ink on your fingers, you stop at the parapet in the long light, with the pool behind you all masts and gold, and you take the accounting the year taught you to take. You are 16. You have a trade, and boots without cracks, and a father with a counter, and a mother with her own hearth, and a sister whose sparrow the legend now runs, followed the family to Clerkenwell, which is certainly false and will be told at every Christmas till the end of the century anyway. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are free enough, and you know, in exact shillings and pence, what every one of those enoughs is worth, which is the one piece of capital the Marshalsea pays out to its children, and it never stops paying interest as long as you live. You do not yet know, leaning on that parapet in the summer of 1825, what London itself does not know. That the great glittering mania your father used to read aloud, the South American mines, the shares doubling by breakfast, the whole paper carnival is in its last months. That before the year is out the banks will begin to break like ice in a thaw, houses in Lombard Street stopping payment, the country banks falling by the dozen, fortunes going out like candles, and that through the wicket of the Marshalsea, all that black winter and for years after, will come new footsteps by the hundred, brushed coats and committal papers, merchants who dined off plate in the spring, each one owing sums your father could not imagine, each one learning the pump, the chalk, the bell, the begging grate. The wall you left has no opinion about any of it. It simply waits, as it always waited. In a trading nation, the Marshalsea never lacks for tenants. The harvest is sown in the boom and the gate reaps it. But that is the world's ledger, and tonight the world may keep it. Yours is ruled and balanced, and the year is over, and it is time now to put it away. So come back one last time, not to the hard months. To one ordinary evening in that room, 10 feet and a half by 8, some quiet night of the middle of the year, when nothing happened at all, because that is the night your memory will choose to keep when it has let the rest go, and memory is always right about these things. The bell is rung, and the strangers are out, and the gate is chained, and the great city has folded itself down to one candle. Your mother sews, and the needle goes through the cloth with a small sound like breath, in and out, the steadiest clock in England. Lucy sleeps behind the sacking screen. one hand open on the blanket, crumbs already set on the sill for the morning. Your father reads yesterday's news of a world that has misplaced him, and turns the page, and the page turning is the loudest thing in the room. The fire is banked to a red whisper. On the door, under the hanging coat, a chalk number keeps its watch and cannot get in. Below in the yard, the last walker finishes his last circuit. You can hear his boots. 50 paces, turn, 50 paces, turn. Slower, slower, done. Someone far down the barracks is singing to a child. 2 walls away, so the song comes through as only a rise and fall. No words, the oldest tune there is. The watchman in the Free Street calls the hour to people who do not need it. And the debt does not sleep, they told you, and it was true. But neither does love, it turns out. And in the long run, in the very long run, love keeps the better books. You're on your mattress between the table and the door, and you are warm enough and fed enough and safe enough, and those 3 are the whole estate of the poor, and tonight the estate is solvent. We are 4, your mother says in your memory, and we are together. Count that. I do. The candle gutters. Your father looks at the flame measuring wick against darkness, and you hear it, the small wet pinch, and the dark comes in kindly, and he says it, the last entry of every day, the words this whole year has taught you to hear as a blessing, because that is what it always was. Well, that'll do for today. Centuries will pass. The Marshalsea you know will change beyond recognition, and then it will not exist at all. The act will soften, and soften again, and the day will come within your own children's lifetime, when England stops caging its debtors altogether, and the gate will shut on an empty yard, and the barracks will be let out for storerooms, and then torn down brick by brick until nothing remains of the whole exact machine but one long southern wall, standing to this day beside a churchyard turned public garden, with a plaque on it, and pigeons where office workers eat their dinners in the sun and do not know, mostly, what held that shadow's shape. And the boy from the staircase next to yours, the small quick-eyed one who went out through the wicket without looking back and looked back once, he will keep his inventory as you guessed he would. He will grow up and write it all down, the pump and the bell and the chalk-white shame and the singing after lock-up, and he will hide his own father's prison inside stories under other names, until the whole world knows the word Marshalsea who never knew the place, and the wall that outlived the prison will be visited forever by strangers from countries he never heard of, come to stand where you slept. Your prison will become the most famous debtor's prison on earth, because one child your own age stood in that yard and refused to forget it. Memory, too, is a debt, and he paid it for everyone. The bridges you watched will go in their turn. The new bridge that rose stone by stone across your year will serve its 140 years and be sold and stand again, if you can believe it, under a desert sun on the far side of an ocean no ship of your pool ever crossed. The pool itself will empty, the forest of masts thinning until the river runs bare and quiet where the world's wealth used a raft so thick a man could nearly cross on the decks. The street cries will fall silent one by one, watercress and milk below and dust, ho! And the last link boy will pocket his last penny, and the coaching inns of the borough will come down, all but one gallery of one of them, kept like a pressed flower. But people will still sign the backs of other people's promises, because friendship will still be friendship, and some of them will still be ruined for it. People will still lie awake doing sums in the dark, adding the same short column again, as if it might total differently at midnight. People will still walk in circles when the walls are close, and build their small committees against the cold, and pretend at supper for their children's sake, and be braver at a pawn counter than soldiers are at breaches. Some things do not change. The arithmetic of love and money does not change. Only the chalk changes, and the name on the gate. So let the gate go now. Let the whole year of it go. The keys and the bell and the spikes and the chalk, the 50 paces and the burst-seamed ball, the needle going in and out by the candle, all of it softly, the way the yard went quiet after the bell. Let it come. The sleep. You have earned it. You carried a family's errands 11 miles a day. You have earned it 10 times over. Let sleep take you the way it took Joseph Pike on his mattress between the table and the door, with the ball in his fist and the watchman calling a fine night in the Marshalsea prison, in the Borough, in the reign of King George IV, 200 years ago and more. Let the city sink to one candle, and the candle to a red whisper, and the whisper to nothing. Let the sounds go one by one the way they went every night inside that wall. The last pot noise from the snuggery, gone. The boots on the paving, gone. The song through 2 walls, rise and fall, further now, further gone. Let your own sums wait on the table till morning. They will keep. They always keep. Nothing in your ledger tonight is owed before dawn. The debt does not sleep, but you are not the debt. You are the one the whole long day was carried for, and the day is carried, and the door of it is shut, and the number on the door cannot get in. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. That is the whole estate, and the estate is honest, and it is enough. The bell has rung. The strangers are out. The gate is chained. And for once, for tonight, the wall is on your side, and everything beyond it can wait. Well, that'll do for today. Good night.